Here we have by far the most expensive laptop I've covered on this channel. It's a ThinkPad with a Xeon CPU, 64GB of RAM and an RTX graphics card for around £400. Let's take a look and see if this hefty laptop is worth its weight. You might be thinking I'm crazy, £400 for a ThinkPad? Well, the value proposition and impressive specs might have you thinking otherwise. Today we're taking a look at a Lenovo ThinkPad P15 Gen 2. Still hasn't piqued your interest? Well, the one we have here would have retailed close to £3,000 back in 2022. Depreciation has certainly bit this one. I bought this mighty machine off cash converters which typically sell used goods, a bit like Goodwill, and sometimes you can find hidden gems like this one. My Australian viewers would know. Anyways, I'm off on a tangent. The laptop came well packed with an included 300-watt power supply which saves me from buying one. Quite pleased with the condition, with minor scuffs but nothing to put me off. All in all, it's a solid machine, but spec wise is what makes it so special. The laptop comes with an Intel Xeon W-11855M CPU, 64GB of ECC DDR4 memory, Nvidia RTX A3000 Graphics and a TB of SSD storage. You get quite a lot for your money, and especially so as these normally go for double on sites like eBay. One recently sold for nearly £1,000. So this machine looks nondescript at first but is quite the workhorse. Let's take a proper look at this beautiful craftsmanship. Well, here we have the ThinkPad P15 Gen 2, and of course the mammoth of a power supply. I mean 300 watts, I don't even think this needs 300 watts, but anyways, let's turn it on and see if everything checks out. Okay, good sign so far. I mean the backlit keyboard is on. Let me go into the BIOS. Yes we can, okay, straight away. Right, will it load up? Yes it will. Okay, F1. Let's take a look at the specs. I mean you guys already know what the specs are, but you want to see it in person, so let's take a look at the BIOS. So at the minute, we're currently working with an Intel Xeon, of course, W-11855M. I mean, I never heard of that CPU prior to owning this ThinkPad, so yeah, there you have it. And of course, for the installed memory, we have 64GB of DDR4 ECC memory. I mean, that's quite cool, isn't it? And the BIOS date is the 28th of October 2024, so not that long ago, to be honest. Let's take a look at the security and see if there's any BIOS passwords or compute trace. Alright, so the BIOS password, disabled and disabled, that's good to see. And of course, the absolute persistence module that is enabled but not activated. So, it means that it's not enabled, so we don't have to worry about it. If you don't know what the absolute persistence module is, if your PC is owned by a company or by an education center, they will probably load some piece of software that will make sure that you don't steal it or try and sell it to another person. Because if it does, they'll flag it up on their system, and it's going to be a long time for you. So it's good that it's not activated. So with all of that said, let's go into Windows and see what this P15 is all about. Looks like system updates are underway. Please keep your device on and plugged in. Looks like the P15 is finally going into Windows after painstakingly waiting a few minutes for that BIOS update. I mean, you don't know how nervous I was, but finally we're into Windows. So let's set this thing up. There you are. Let's set this thing up and of course download all the drivers and software that we need to test this P15 to the max. Well, this is not what I wanted to see when setting this thing up. I mean, yeah, okay. Looks like there's Windows Autopilot on this machine, which is not a good sign, of course. I mean, it's tied to Aston Martin, out of all companies out there. Okay, so this is quite the concern, so there's nothing much I can do except maybe try and contact Aston Martin, so yeah, okay. I was kind of expecting this to happen because the price was way too good. But anyways, let's take a look and see what we can do. Well, it looks like we got shafted. The thought of Windows Autopilot being present is quite daunting. If you didn't know, Windows Autopilot is essentially external software used for remote management. In layman terms, it's there so organizations can set up computers seamlessly in line with their terms. When a PC is tied to Autopilot, upon setup, the only option is to sign in with its respective organization, in our case being Aston Martin. People mistake Autopilot as some devilish program that tracks your IP. Well, no, that's compute trace, which should definitely be disabled. It can actually be bypassed quite easily, well, less easily now that bypass Monroe has been wiped. Still, there's other way arounds. If you're wondering, yes, I did contact Aston Martin but have yet to receive a reply. It's been 2 sodding weeks, so at this point I don't really care. My suspicions are that they forgot to remove it from their system as the BIOS password and computer trace were both disabled, only possible by the admin. Even with stinking autopilot, this laptop is still an excellent deal, so it would be foolish to return. Well, it's been like 2 weeks since I filmed that last episode of Unfortunate Events, but anyways, we're finally into the P15 Gen 2. If you're wondering how the hell I even got into it with Windows Autopilot and all of that, well, you can just bypass it. It's not that big of an issue, but it is kind of annoying that it is still on there. I mean, I did try and contact Aston Martin to see if they could remove it or whatnot, but 2 weeks later, got no reply, so I'm kind of stuck with it, and I don't really want to return it, because I'll show you why. So upon setting it up, I went into settings as you do, and this is something that I found out. So if you go to system display, this has a 4K display. Let me just bring this a bit closer so you can see. This has a 4K display. What the hell? I mean, Cash Converters didn't even mention that on the listing. So the fact that it has a 4K display means that there's really no point in actually returning it, because you can sell this for a lot more than 400, even with that Windows Autopilot that we do have. Now, it is possible to get rid of it. I just have to try a bit harder in contacting them, and hopefully they can rectify this issue, because it is kind of annoying when setting up Windows, but you can bypass it with this string of characters and all is well. I mean, they did get rid of OOBE bypass in a row, which is kind of annoying, so you do have to use a different bypass, but it works as normal. And of course, you can use Linux if you really want to. As for the specs, if I have not mentioned, let me just get a bit closer once again. We have an Intel Xeon W-11855M, 3.2 GHz, 6 cores and 12 threads. As for the memory, we have 64 GB of ECC DDR4 memory at 32 MHz, which is crazy. I mean, that's a lot more than what I have in my main rig. As for the disk, we have a 1TB SSD, NVMe. For the Wi-Fi, we have Wi-Fi 6E, which is pretty good. For the GPU, now this is a highlight of this laptop, we have an Nvidia RTX A3000 with 6 GB of VRAM. And of course, you've got UHD graphics, which no one really cares about. But all in all, this is a pretty good machine for the price. Only £400. I mean, I can't really complain. Now, the other reason why I don't really want to return this is because I kind of want to use it for myself. I mean, you know, all the laptops that I do cover on this channel, I kind of sell them on and, you know, here and there. But this one, I do want to keep and actually use it personally. So hopefully this laptop, you know, besides the Windows Autopilot crap, is all right. So let's take a look under the hood and see how it is with a little disassembly. Anyways, here we have the P15. Let's flip it around and give it a well-deserved disassembly so we can take a look at its upgradability options, and if it needs a clean, we can clean out those fans and give it some fresh thermal paste. Now, one highlight with the P15 Gen 2 is its upgradability options. In here, you can upgrade the RAM, and this has 4 DIMM slots altogether, which is kinda incredible. Also, you have 2 NVMe slots and another one on the other side, so you can upgrade it how many terabytes you really want. I don't know, 6, 10, 12, flipping a billion. Anyways, let's take this out and see what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, just like that, and it should just come out with a bit of force, I think. Okay, there you go. Okay, so there's our little door, and it's held on with a few clips, so not too bad. And of course, you have the 2 sticks of ECC 32 GB of DDR4, which is quite crazy in my opinion. And of course, if you do want to upgrade the SSD, there's currently a 1TB in here, but there are also easy access to 2, if I can peel it up, okay, there's easy access to 2 NVMe slots. So if I really want to upgrade it down the line, I can. It is not hard whatsoever. I mean, I don't have to take off this whole chassis. It is completely easy, and to be honest, anyone can do it. So there you have it. And it also has these nice thermal pads, which is a nice touch. Nice to have those. So let's take a look at those RAM sticks. So like I said before, there's 4 DIMM slots in here. So you can upgrade this theoretically to 128 GB of ECC memory. Resistant, isn't it? Okay, there you have it. Okay, you have to be a bit careful because this memory is not cheap. I had a look at online, and one of these sticks cost around 80, 90 pounds, which is quite crazy. I mean, I don't think they make these anymore, but there you have it. 2 32 GB sticks of ECC SODIMMs. So let's just put those back in and flip this around so we can take a look at those other SODIMMs. So yeah, like I said before, really easy to upgrade the RAM and the storage on the P15 Gen 2. A lot easier on the laptops that I've covered in the past. So what we're going to do now is just undo all of these screws on the chassis, then we can flip it around and take off that keyboard, because unfortunately the two SODIMMs are located under the keyboard, but it's not too hard to take a look at. Alright, so the keyboard has finally been taken out. I mean, that took flipping forever. That took like 20 minutes. But anyways, here you have your 2242 sized NVMe slot, which is nice. You of course have your Wi-Fi card, you have the display connectors, and of course the keyboard connectors. And if you take off this metal cover, you have two DIMM slots and of course an SSD slot. So let's take that out and see what it looks like underneath. Just like that, hopefully. There you have it. There's a little metal plate, and of course you have your two DIMM slots, which are currently unoccupied, but you can put in an extra 64GB of RAM to a total of 128, which is OP. We do not need that much RAM. And of course you have your NVMe SSD, which is a 1TB. Okay, all in all, that's pretty good. Let's assemble this back up and see what it looks like with that back cover off. Bloody hell, what's with these newer ThinkPads and not being able to take off the back panel? I mean, I had to use all of this to take off this. But anyways, this is what the P15 looks like with the back panel off. Of course, you have your battery, you've got the two DIMM slots, you've got the two SSD slots, you've got the two fans, and the big heatsink, which is covering the GPU and CPU. The GPU is user replaceable, which is kind of cool, and we'll take a look at that. So all in all, it's a pretty compact package, and yeah, honestly, it looks pretty good to me. Those fans are really dirty, so we do need to give them a good dusting, but other than that, everything looks as normal. So let's just continue with the disassembly, disconnect the battery, and take a look at the GPU and CPU and give them a good clean if it needs it, and also some fresh thermal paste. So let's go ahead. Before we start, let's just disconnect the battery before working with any other components, and let's take a look at that heatsink. So one thing I do like about this heatsink is it is numbered with the screws. So for example, here is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. It's all on opposing sides, so it alleviates pressure on all of the sides, which is good because I mean, that's what you should do when taking off a heatsink. So let's just start with number 1 and then go accordingly, and then we should be able to take this out. So let's go ahead. Alright, just like that, it should be able to just come off. Alright, it is, but we do need to disconnect those fans. So let's just disconnect the fan number 1 and the fan number 2, and we should be good to go. There you are. And just like that, it should be able to come right out. And would you take a look at that? That is a flipping behemoth of a heatsink. Oh my god. Of course you have the two fans. I mean, those are flipping huge as well. And of course the thermal pad. So let's just leave that aside and focus our attention. Okay, let's just focus our attention to the GPU and CPU. So of course the GPU, like I said before, is user upgradable, and that's what it looks like. I mean, that is flipping huge. And of course you have the Intel Xeon. So let's just clean those up and give them some fresh thermal paste. Just a little close-up on what the GPU and CPU look like. I mean, that is kind of crazy. Would you take a look at that? And of course, I don't think I mentioned this, but the battery is 94 watt hours. I mean, that is a pretty big battery, but this laptop is also really powerful, so I think it does need it. So all in all, like I said before, a pretty compact package. So a bit about the GPU, it's of course the RTX A3000 Graphics, which is a pretty good GPU even in 2025. It released in like early 2021, so it's been around 4 or 5 years. But this GPU is really good, and we will test it later on in the video, so do stick around for that. Of course, it has 6GB of VRAM, quite evident with the 6 memory chips, but overall this GPU is pretty good, and that Xeon as well. That Xeon is a killer, so we will test that out later on. So let's just clean that two up, reassemble it, and we should be good to go. So I think that should be enough for now. And let's just give this beefy heatsink a good clean, because I mean there's a lot of dust. Would you take a look at that? Look at that dust. Tasty. But yeah, let's just give this a good clean, and of course clean up that dry thermal paste. We don't need to touch the thermal pads because they look pretty pristine in my opinion. So let me do that, and we should be able to put this back in. Of course, let's get the beefy heatsink in place, connect the fans back in. So yeah, compared to the other disassemblies I've done, this is probably one of the easiest, honestly. Like, if you watched my MSI video that I did a few weeks ago, that disassembly was a flipping nightmare because the amount of parts and the amount of screws that came out was crazy. Alright, that's all complete. All we have to do now is just reconnect the battery and we should be good to go. So let's just put that back in nice and slowly. And there you have it. Okay, now the final thing is, of course, get the back panel. It's like metal, like heavy duty as hell. So let's just put this back in and then screw it back together, and hopefully we should be done. Let's hope nothing went wrong during that disassembly, because I always have that sinking feeling that I did something wrong. But anyways, let's just screw this back in and see how it goes. Before we put on that little RAM door, I just want to install another terabyte of SSD storage. This is a Lexar NM610 Pro, and it should be good enough. It is PCIe Gen 3, so let's just put it into slot number 1 and screw it back into place so we can hopefully take a look at it. Alright, and there you have it. And of course, I do have that extra slot, so if I do want to upgrade it down the line, I can. And of course, that extra SSD slot underneath the keyboard. So there's a lot of upgradability options within this laptop, which I do like. Okay, with that said, let's just put the small door back on, and we should be good to go, and we can take a look at this P15 more in detail. Alright, anyways, let's just turn on ThinkPad and see if it goes into Windows. Yes, it will. Okay, so thankfully we've not broken anything, which is a good sign. Let's just go into Windows so we can actually run some benchmarks on this thing and see how it performs overall. So with all of that said, let's go ahead. Alright, looks like everything is working and functional, which is great to see. Let's take a look at that battery health and see what it has to say. Here we have the battery health. We do have a 94 watt hour battery in this ThinkPad, which is honestly quite a big battery, and the full charge capacity is 95.32, which honestly makes no sense. The fact that we're over the original design capacity is kind of crazy. So we have 320 accumulated charge cycles, which is kind of moderate. That is what you'd expect in a laptop like this. So all in all, it's not too bad, and we are working with a 300 watt power adapter, which is a bit higher than what they normally ask for, but honestly it doesn't really matter. All in all, it's a pretty good package and a pretty good battery. Here we have Cinebench R23 running on the P15. Let's see how well that Xeon actually does. So we do have 6 cores and 12 threads in this thing. Let's start the test and see what score we get. Well, it looks like we got a score of 9,225, which is in line with an i9-9800H, which is a pretty good CPU, so it does show that this Xeon is quite capable. I did run this test twice, firstly on 4K, and we got a score of 8,720, and at 1080p we of course got that 9,225. I'm not sure why there's such a big delta on the original score and the new score, but I'm guessing that because it's 4K, it's pushing more pixels, therefore uses a bit more processing power. So overall, I think the CPU did quite well. Of course, we got to test out those RTX A3000 graphics, so here we have Value Benchmark. We're going to run this test twice, firstly at 4K and also at 1080p, so we can kind of see those differences. So with all of that said, let's start the test and see what score we get. So on 4K, we're currently getting around 54 FPS, which is a bit lower than 60, but honestly, it's not too bad. And the GPU is at 66 degrees at 98% utilization, of course, because it is using the GPU, and it's only using around 98 watts, which is honestly quite power efficient. The CPU is 61 degrees at 11%, because it's not really using the CPU in this test, and it's only using around 10 gigabytes of RAM. So all in all, I think this test is proving that the A3000 graphics are actually quite decent in 2025, but we'll find out what score we actually get by the end of this test. Well, on 4K on high settings, we got an average FPS of 51.2 and a score of 2,144. Well, considering that we are on 4K, I think this result is actually quite impressive, so let's take a look at how it does in 1080p. Anyways, here we are on 1080p, and already we can see a pretty big improvement. I mean, 187 FPS straight off the bat. That's quite good. The GPU is of course 74 degrees at 100% utilization, and it's currently using around 77 watts. So I don't think it's using all of the GPU power, but it is doing pretty good in Value Benchmark, it has to be said. We're currently getting around 183 FPS in the more open areas, 204, 214. I mean, would you take a look at that? 280 FPS in the more open areas. That's quite crazy. In my opinion, this is a pretty good test at how this actually performs, because let's be honest, most people aren't going to run 4K applications on this. You're going to run around 1080p, 1440. So this is a good representation of how people will use it. I mean, 164, 168, the screen still looks pretty good even at 1080p. So I mean, it has to be said, this is quite impressive. But anyways, let's see what score we get by the end of this test. So on 1080p, we got an average FPS of 165.5 and a score of 6,926 with a minimum FPS of 52.2 and a maximum FPS of 312.1. I'm actually quite impressed with that score, because it is quite similar to my RX 6750 XT, which set me back like £400, which is essentially the price of this laptop. Granted, that has 12 gigabytes of VRAM and this has 6, but honestly, it did quite well in this test, so I can't really say much. All in all, a pretty good result. Well, ThinkPads aren't really made for gaming, but the P15 can definitely game with the RTX GPU. And in Minecraft 1.21 Java, we're currently getting around 456 FPS on medium settings. Let me just show you real quick. We're on 12 chunks all around, quality settings on fancy and default, minimum. Smooth lighting is enabled, so all in all, pretty moderate settings. So honestly, you can play Minecraft on this like as normal, and the screen looks so good. Like, this is probably one of the best screens I've tested on a laptop. We're getting around 420, 440. The GPU is at 73 degrees, so it's not too warm, and is at 100% utilization and only using 90 watts. We will be testing out shaders later on, and I think that will be a better test on how this GPU can actually perform. The CPU is at 97 degrees, which is quite warm. 415, 417. Yeah, I mean, feels completely smooth. And let me test that out on shaders and see what we actually get. So let me just go into shaders, and let's just enable shaders and use Astral X, which is essentially a moderate to higher end shader, and it is quite intensive on lower end machines, but on this one it should do pretty well. So okay, we're getting around 23, 24 FPS, which is a bit on the lower side. I was hoping around 50, 55, but we are on 4K, which makes sense. I mean, it is pushing a lot more pixels than it normally does at 1080p. You know what, let's put it at 1080p and see if that changes anything. Maybe it will. Okay, so as you can see, full screen resolution is on current. Let's just put it to 1080p. There you are, and hopefully we should yield a better result. So there you have it, 77 FPS, 74. I mean, that is pretty decent in my opinion. 81, 82. This is essentially a gaming laptop with that GPU, the A3000 graphics with 6GB of VRAM. I think it is equivalent to a 1660 Super or a 1080 Ti, something like that. I'll put the tech power up table on the screen, but anyways, look, 64, 71, just flying around as normal, as you normally do in Minecraft, breaking a few blocks, killing a few animals here and there. Okay, all in all, it runs pretty well, and let's just go into the water and see if that changes anything. Okay, so we're getting around 70, 69, so it does lower a little bit because water is intensive on shaders, especially on Astral X. So 57, 54, 56, honestly pretty good, and it's using around 13GB of RAM. That is actually pretty decent. So the GPU is still at 77 degrees at 100% utilization, and it's still using around 90 watts. So the A3000 graphics are actually quite power efficient, and the CPU is still at 82, 83 degrees at 26% utilization, and it's only using around 21 watts of power. So again, pretty reasonable. I mean, do let me know if those temperatures are decent. I'm not sure if 82 degrees is high on a Xeon. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because I've never really tested out a Xeon on a laptop. But 62, 61, 63, just flying around as normal. Let's test out less intensive shaders, Silver's Vibrant Shaders Light, and we should yield a better result. So we're currently getting around 170, 221. What the hell? 221 on shaders? That's kind of crazy, honestly. And just flying around, we're getting 222. So we're staying around the low 200s, which is pretty good. And honestly, I have to say, these shaders are probably even better than the Astral X. I mean, the colors really do pop out. I don't know how much you can tell on your screen, but yeah, 240, 230, 220, honestly pretty good. And once again, the GPU is at 70 degrees, so the high 70s. The CPU is at 100 degrees. What the hell is going on? Oh my god, it's at boiling point. Chill out. Okay, the GPU is at 93% utilization, and the CPU is at 27. It's only using 30 watts of power. I'm not sure what the TDP of the CPU really is. I think it's around 40, 50 watts. So it's not using that much power. And yeah, 97 degrees, that is quite a concern. So all in all, it's actually a pretty good result from the P15. Just need to watch for those CPU temps, of course. I don't want to test out too many games on the P15 because that is not what it's intended for. But anyways, here we have Fortnite, and we're going to be testing it on DX12 and DX11. The current settings that we're working with are just the settings that were pre-selected. We're currently working with 1440p, and the settings are, we do have Nvidia DLSS, and everything is on medium/high, so this will give us a good indication of how it performs in Fortnite. So let's take a look, shall we? And just to preface, this is not a gaming laptop. I mean, it wasn't intended for gaming, but you can actually game on this. I mean, as you saw from the Minecraft results, it does do pretty well, and it's actually quite comparable to my gaming PC, which cost me way more than this laptop. Keep in mind, this only cost me £400, and you're getting a lot for your money. So let's just hope Fortnite performs as well as Minecraft. Like, you don't need any more than this. You got a pretty good screen, you got a good keyboard, you got a good trackpad. Everything else is good. You got good specs as well. You got 64GB of RAM and that really good GPU. The one thing I am concerned about are, of course, the temps. I mean, it's currently sitting at 90 degrees just doing nothing. I mean, it is generating the game, I guess. But, and of course, that battery health. We do need to watch out that battery health. Okay, I guess my Wi-Fi is lagging a bit because we just jumped straight into the game. But we're currently getting around 104 FPS just flying down, which is pretty good, honestly. 104, 105. Let's just glide down and see what we actually get. Okay, 117, 119. Okay, it's actually doing pretty well. I mean, there's no major stutters. For the GPU, we're at 72 degrees, and for the CPU, we're at 94. Once again, pretty high. The GPU is at 80% utilization and the CPU is at 100%, so there's no CPU bottlenecks going on here, which is good to see. The GPU is at 87 watts, so around the high 80s, and the CPU is around 40 watts. So the CPU is actually lower than I expected. I was expecting around 50-60 watts, but I guess it is a laptop, not a desktop. 110, 109, just moving around. Let's see if we can find people and actually kill them. Bit grotesque, but you know what I mean. Anyways, I mean, if it was really thermal throttling, then there would be quite a large amount of stutters, but at the minute there's nothing really going on. Oh, that's cool. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, I guess I'm still pretty. But anyways, yeah, there you have Fortnite at 1440p on the pre-selected settings. Let's take a look and see how it does in DX11 performance mode. Anyways, here we have Fortnite and performance mode, which I presume a lot of people use, so let's test that out and see how it does. We're currently working on, of course, performance mode, and I think it is at 1080p. Let me have a look. Yes, it's at 1080p, 16:9, and all the settings are on Epic, so let's see how it does on performance mode. Hopefully we do average above 120 FPS. I mean, I have to say that screen is so nice. I think I've said that like 5 times in this video, but you really have to be here to see it. Like, this screen is flipping crazy. But anyways, we're into the game and we're currently at 55-63, so a bit lower than I expected, but we're getting about 130, 140. The game doesn't look as good as in DX12, but honestly, it's perfectly usable. Let's just wait and see how it actually is once we're into the game. Alright, so just gliding around, we're getting around 212, 214 FPS. I mean, the GPU temperature is quite low, it's at 69 degrees. But the CPU is once again really high, 100 degrees. Again, what the hell is going on? I'm surprised this laptop hasn't died yet. 99 degrees. That's crazy, honestly. But just gliding down, we're getting around 164, 163. I mean, I'm not too concerned with the temps at the minute because there's no thermal throttling going on. As you can tell, there's no stuttering or anything really. It is quite stable. I mean, you can tell by the frame time, only 4.6 milliseconds. It's not too high. And the CPU is using around 29 watts of power. It's only using around 16 gigabytes of RAM. Keep in mind, we have 64 gigs, so there's a lot of headroom to do other things on this laptop than to just play games. So of course you can play games, you can do some editing, some CAD work, photo editing, whatever you need to. 64 gigabytes of RAM is sufficient for most people, honestly. But yeah, 171, here we have a chest, let's go. Okay, let's just slurp up this juice. I guess it isn't GPU bottleneck, but it's not using all of the GPU, which is a bit annoying, I guess. I don't know how you can change that. But I guess in performance mode, it runs pretty well. We're getting a pretty stable average, and honestly, I have no complaints thus far. Ooh, look at that. Of course we gotta talk about that screen. Oh my god, it's so nice. It's a 4K display, 60Hz. I think it is 60Hz, which is quite unfortunate, but it's a ThinkPad. What do you expect? It's a workstation laptop. You don't need more than 60Hz, I guess. I mean, look at those colors. They are so good. So of course, with it being 60Hz, the contrast ratio is 1500:1, which is pretty good for a laptop display. And it has 600 nits of brightness, so this gets pretty bright, so using it outside is no problem whatsoever. And the sRGB color gamut is at 99%, so that is pretty good. I mean, you could probably tell from before how good this screen really was, but to actually see it is a completely different experience. It is a really good screen, and the fact that it's 4K only makes it that much better and just makes me want to keep it even more. So yeah, a pretty good screen. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Of course, we have to do an audio test on the P15, and I have to say, before even testing it, I know that these speakers are really good when playing Minecraft, obviously, and obviously just watching a few videos here and there. I am using this song not because of the meme, I mean it is a pretty good song nonetheless, but the fact that it has pretty good bass and it does show how good the speakers really are. So let's take a listen, shall we? So yeah, we've basically taken a look at essentially everything there is to this laptop, but there is one segment I do want to show you, and of course that is video editing. This is a workstation laptop, and we do need to know how good video editing is on this laptop. So yeah, the next time you'll see me, I'll be in an airplane. A little trip to the other side of the Atlantic won't stop me, and since the P15 is a great desktop replacement, I thought why not take it along to see how well it holds up. On the plane, well, it just about fit on the tray table, and I managed to edit a portion of this video. Battery life wasn't the best, but I honestly didn't expect it to last longer than this flight. The plane had an outlet, but it only supported up to 125 watts. I got bits done, but it's recommended to be near a power outlet. Premiere Pro video editing on this machine is honestly flawless. I never encountered any random freezes or lag within the timeline. Using special effects and color grading worked out quite well, but I mean, what did you really expect? These specs still hold up well for a proficient video editing machine. Exporting the timeline at 1080-60 took around 20 minutes or so, quite acceptable. I suspect with additional VRAM it would have fared a little bit better. Also with that grey screen, a bit of Photoshop worked out quite well given this panel is pretty color accurate. So what do I think about the P15 Gen 2? Well, aside from the minor setback, it actually surprised me, and for the price, can you really get any better? This damn laptop cost almost $5 a few years ago. The additional RAM and that exceptional screen makes this a pleasure to use. A Xeon laptop with RTX graphics? Yeah, it's quite ridiculous. Honestly, I have to say this is the best laptop I've ever used and would definitely be loved for years to come. The perfect desktop replacement. I'll keep you all updated on the autopilot situation if you're still angst about it all. Anyways, I'll leave it here. What do you think about the P15 Gen 2? Leave your thoughts down below. Be sure to like, subscribe, share and turn on notifications. Continue to support and I'll continue to deliver. Thanks so much for making it this far. See you in the next one.